Training camp is a time for lesser-known NBA players to compete for deep bench roster spots. While teams occasionally make regrettable final rosters decisions, this has become less of an issue in the two-way contract era, which provides more roster flexibility. Still, in the NBA history, there are always some cuts that are regrettable by teams sometime later. In this video, I will examine some of the most significant misjudgments teams have made during training camp by looking at questionable cuts in NBA history. And remember, it is not just Jeremy Lin. Number 10. Chris Birdman Anderson. He was actually the first player ever who was called from D-League back then to the NBA in 2001, with the Denver Nuggets getting him. But they weren't his first NBA contract. In 2001 off-season, Phoenix Suns signed him late, but then waived him during training camp. They had a powerhouse of centers in that year, namely Jake Tsakalidis, Jake Voskuhl, Alton Ford and Bo Outlaw. That doesn't look good from today's perspective. Over his first 3 NBA seasons, Anderson averaged over 10 points and 10 rebounds with 3.3 blocks per 36 minutes. What's more, as a rookie in his first season after Phoenix waived him, Anderson made Denver 13.5 points per 100 possessions better during his time on the floor. Then he went on to Miami Heat and won a championship there. Number 9. Robert Covington. After spending his rookie season with the Daryl Morey's Houston Rockets, Covington was waived by Houston in 2014 training camp before getting picked up less than a month later by the Philadelphia 76ers, who were then led by another analytic-focused shot caller in Sam Hinkie. The analytics wound up being right about Covington, as the 3-and-D swingman had a first-team All-Defense campaign in 2018, in which he shot nearly 37% from 3. That's not to say the Rockets made some egregious decision in waiving Covington. However, as Houston at that point was nearing contender status and didn't have much playing time to offer Covington. On the other hand, the 76ers were in a different position, as they were in the thick of the process and gave Covington plenty of room to develop. Waiving Covington in favor of rookie Kostas Papanikolaou, who was already 24 at that time and whose NBA career would last just 69 games total, does look questionable in hindsight. But even so, getting waived allowed Covington to develop in a low-pressure situation in Philadelphia. So once again, this waiving worked out well for both sides. Number 8. Raja Bell. For younger viewers who may not know, Raja Bell was a role-player legend in the 2000s, notorious for his toughness on defensive end and his pest-like ability to get under opponents' skin. Bell even had some memorable battles with Kobe Bryant, an extension of the playoff rivalry between Phoenix Suns and Los Angeles Lakers back then. Bell was an elite defender in his prime, making 1 first-team All-Defense and 1 second-team All-Defense while earning Defensive Player of the Year and Most Improved Player of the Year votes in his career. Prior to Bell's career really taking off in Phoenix, he was originally signed by both Atlanta Hawks and San Antonio Spurs, getting waived in training camp by both, first in 1999 and then in 2000. Either way, things worked out just fine for Bell, who ended up playing 12 seasons and earned over $35 million in his career, which is similar to like 150 millions nowadays. Number 7. Hassan Whiteside. Memphis Grizzlies waived him in October 2014, just ahead of the upcoming season. To make matters worse, Memphis actually was able to re-sign Whiteside in November of that season, but waived him 1 day later only to see him sign with the Miami Heat 4 days after that. Whiteside would finish 4th in Most Improved Player voting that very season and earned Defensive Player of the Year votes as a member of the Heat. He would finish as high as 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting in his career and has 1 second-team All-Defense under his belt. To their credit, the Grizzlies were a great team that season even without Whiteside. Plus, they had an elite frontcourt in Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph, and probably felt Costa Koufos was a serviceable enough backup to the big Spaniard. So the Whiteside situation wasn't some huge mistake by Memphis. Plus, it probably worked out best for Whiteside that the Grizzlies cut him at that point, as he went to a Heat team needing a starting center, a role he was able to fill for 32 games that very year, eventually leading to him getting a max deal from Miami 2 years later. Number 6. Jeremy Lin. On 9th December 2011, the Golden State Warriors waived second-year guard Jeremy Lin because they needed cap room to sign a restricted free agent big man, DeAndre Jordan, to a 4-year, $43 million offer sheet. Well, Jordan's original team, the Los Angeles Clippers, matched the offer sheet, meaning Golden State lost Lin for nothing. That very season of 2012 was when Linsanity would take place, as Lin exploded for his new team, the New York Knicks. Lin would finish 6th in Most Improved Player voting that year, and then finish 7th in 6th Man of the Year voting in 2016. And although the Linsanity run would really be the peak of his career, the fact Golden State lost him to try to nab Jordan from the Clippers, which had very little chance for success, means they lost Lin for nothing. Makes this one of the worst training camp cuts ever. Further consider that besides Stephen Curry, Golden State's other point guards that year were Ish Smith, George Jenkins, and late Nate Robinson, as the team won 23 games and lost 43 in lockout year. And that really drives home the point that the Warriors should have kept him around. Number 5. Spencer Dinwiddie. Can you be waived twice by the same team in 1 year? Well, Dinwiddie was. After 2 seasons in the Detroit Pistons, Spencer Dinwiddie was traded to the Chicago Bulls during the 2016 offseason for Cameron Burstow. Chicago then waived Dinwiddie not once that summer, but twice. The second time coming in training camp. In December of that year, the Brooklyn Nets would sign Dinwiddie off of the Bulls G League team, where he spent 5 seasons, in which he would earn Most Improved Player votes 3 separate times and 6 Man of the Year votes once. Chicago was in a tough situation as far as keeping Dinwiddie for 2017, as they had multiple young point guards who were former first-round picks and still on their rookie-scale contracts. Jerian Grant and former Rookie of the Year Michael Carter-Williams. The Bulls were probably trying to be savvy and keep Dinwiddie hidden on their G League team until a time they could bring him up to the main team, but the Nets did well to pluck him out of there and give him the playing time he needed to develop into the solid starting point guard he would eventually become. Number 4. Alex Caruso. Now considered one of the best guard defenders in the league, Alex Caruso originally developed as a member of the Los Angeles Lakers for 4 years before heading to Chicago. What many may not remember is that Caruso's first non-Summer League NBA contract was with the Oklahoma City Thunder as a training camp invite in 2016. Ultimately, Caruso would be waived less than a month later, before spending his first year out of the college on the Thunder's G League squad. Then, in 2017, Lakers would pick up Caruso on a 2-way contract, and the rest is history, as he helped the Lakers win the 2020 championship before getting paid by Chicago to the tune of $37 million over 4 years. Not bad for a player once waived in training camp. Some of the young guards who made the Oklahoma City roster over Caruso that year include Semach Christon, Alex Abrines, and Cameron Payne. Not exactly an elite group, but respectable players who had at least a cup of coffee in the NBA. Either way, Caruso probably just wasn't ready for the NBA in his first year out of college, as it took him until 2019 to get going as a good role player. 2 full years after he got waived by the Thunder in training camp. Now he is a Thunder player again, which really winds up as a really nice ending to his story. Number 3. Patrick Beverly. Acquired by the Heat in 2009, Beverly would go on to be waived by the team in 2010 training camp. It's hard to fault Miami for that, as Beverly would need 3 years of seasoning in Europe before getting another NBA shot, one that came with the Houston Rockets in 2013. What's brutal about this situation is that if Beverly had just been NBA ready early on, he would have been an excellent fit on the Big 3 Heat alongside LeBron James, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, as the team desperately needed point guard help at the time, especially for a defensive-minded point guard like Beverly. However, Miami, in as big of a win-now mode as any team ever has been in 2011, needed more of a sure thing at the position, and chose to go with Mario Chalmers and veteran point guard Carlos Arroyo at point guard, eventually even signing Mike Bibby for the team's playoff run. The Heat failed to win a championship that year, but did win rings in the next 2 seasons after they were able to get a serviceable backup point guard in Norris Cole in the 2011 NBA draft. Still, the Beverly pick should have worked out better for Miami. The Heat were just a few years too early in their evaluation of the eventual starting NBA point guard. Number 2. Bruce Bowen. He was clearly one of the best wing defenders of his generation. Bowen was a monster on that end of the floor, earning 5 first-team All-Defensive and 3 second-team All-Defensive selections in his prime, and finishing second in Defensive Player of the Year voting 3 times. What many don't remember is the fact that Bowen was actually originally a training camp cut by Miami Heat, who waived him in October 1995, before his career really took off. Bowen would then spend the next season continuing his development in the Continental Basketball Association, named CBA. Bowen would then be re-signed by Miami in 1997, playing just 1 game for the team after he had already spent time in France and the CBA that campaign. That's all to say, Bowen bounced around a lot early in his career, before finally breaking out and establishing himself as an NBA player, which also happened with Miami in 2001. That took place in Bowen's age 31 season, a year that saw him finish with second-team All-Defense honors and 8th in the Defensive Player of the Year vote. It would be easy to nitpick the Heat for not keeping Bowen around and waiving him in training camp, but it's obvious he just wasn't ready for the NBA at that point, judging by how much time he spent either overseas or in the CBA in his early 20s. Plus, Miami was a 61-win team that season. Bowen played 1 game for the team, so the Heat weren't exactly in a place to give up developmental minutes to a 25-year-old rookie. Still, how impressive was it of Bowen to spend so much time early in his professional career bouncing around, getting cut in training camp, coming back on 10-day deals, and to finally break out as a 31-year-old. That's nearly unheard of. Number 1. Stephen Jackson. In October of 1999, Stephen Jackson was waived in training camp by the Vancouver Grizzlies, along with Rich King and Antoine Smith, though the latter 2 wouldn't make Vancouver regret it, as neither played another minute in the NBA after that. Jackson, on the other hand, would go on to play 14 seasons in the NBA, which is more than Grizzlies spent in Vancouver. Besides playing a role in San Antonio's 2003 championship, Jackson also earned Most Improved Player votes twice and even MVP vote in 2010. Of course, it's hard to give Vancouver too much grief for waiving Jackson, as he played for 8 NBA teams in his career, bouncing around a lot, almost certainly because of his attitude, and didn't even play in the NBA in the season after the Grizzlies waived him. Regardless, in a statistical sense, no one has produced more after being a training camp cut than Jackson. In hindsight, it clearly doesn't really look like a good decision, especially considering Vancouver had pretty weak young guards at the time. But maybe Jackson needed to get his priorities straight and pay his dues in lowly leagues before getting another shot in the NBA to blossom into the player he eventually became. Okay, that's it for today, thanks for watching, and I see you next time, bye!